Well, I'm increasingly convinced that the only way that this virus, at least in the United States, and I'm sorry if you live outside the United States and you don't care about me talking about them every day as far as this virus is concerned, but that's what I'm focused on because that's where I live. The only way that this is going to be, brought under control in the United States is not through the intervention of government, because they are screwing it up as expected, but rather through seasonality. And what I mean by that is that with a lot of viruses, like say the regular flu, and other viruses, they have there's seasonality to them in that they are more or less prevalent in certain parts of the year. They can only really spread effectively under certain conditions and certain climates. For example, if it gets too hot, the idea is that certain viruses are not going to be able to spread because they'll die too quickly outside the human body. They won't have spent enough time, on surfaces, for example, to be able to be brought and I guess contracted by another person. The idea is if someone, coughs into their hand and then opens a door, that, if it's really hot out, the virus on the door will die before someone else goes and touches it and, avoids getting themselves sick. And this is always on the margins. It's not like you can't get sick, if you're in a certain part of the year in which the virus isn't prevalent, but it's not going to spread at such a rapid rate. And of course, that's a big if because we don't know that yet. There's not enough data to know whether this is something that can survive in warm climates. But it's our last hope at this point because the response of the U.S. has, one, been very slow, and two, even now, is inefficient in dealing with this crisis. Yesterday, I talked about how the flowchart that the White House showed, determining what the preconditions were for someone to receive the test, which people were going to be tested, required that somebody already be symptomatic, that they already be showing symptoms of the virus. And we know that not everyone who catches the virus, as I've said so many times, actually develops symptoms. So a lot of people are just asymptomatic carriers who are spreading this around. Now, Haiti apparently, just to give an example, a very poor country, possibly the poorest country on Earth, depending on what metric you look at, is testing everyone who comes off of a plane there. Everyone who comes into Haiti, because Haiti, of course, is on an island. I guess it's a little easier for them to screen everyone coming in. And there's probably not a lot of traffic in and out of Haiti relative to other very large countries like the U.S. But Haiti's testing everyone who comes in. But here in the U.S., only people who are showing symptoms of the virus and think that they were in contact with someone who had the virus can get tested. And so, of course, there's massive holes in that net that's meant to catch all of the infected people. And so the virus certainly will be able to spread unhampered by U.S. government intervention. Sorry that I'm stuttering so much today. It's just that, really this is, I guess it's starting to set in with me, how bad this could get. Even though I still don't, I'm not going to go out there with doom porn and say that I think this is the apocalypse or something like that. I don't. I guess I'm just a little, taken aback. I have a very strong contrarian instinct, and these last 2 days, both yesterday's press conference and today's press conference. Yesterday, the press conference was held by the president. Today, it was held by the vice president. Both were received very positively. Certainly had good optics. The president and the vice president and everyone around them seemed very serious. They seemed like they were competent and on the case. They came across very well, and of course, as I went over yesterday, the markets received the president's press conference very favorably. However, we are well past the point in which, good talking is going to do anything to assuage my concerns. The time for a press conference telling everyone, hey, guys, we're on it, we've got this, was in January or early February. It is not, in mid-March. I think that certainly folks in the stock market are completely clueless when it comes to what this virus may mean. This is not something that, of course, that can be solved by a couple of good press conferences. Ultimately, the direction that we're headed, because this outbreak has been allowed to get as bad as it actually is, and again, I think they're still trying to suppress the numbers by not testing as many people as they should. I think that's a conscious decision at this point because they've realized it's gotten so far out of hand that they don't want the number of confirmed cases to really reflect reality. The fact of the matter is, though, that if the confirmed cases are really as high, as they as estimates would indicate, as we would assume based on how bad things have gotten in other countries like Italy and Iran, well, then eventually the U.S.'s hand will be forced, and they will have to take more extreme measures. I discussed, was it a couple days ago, the very strong possibility that within a short period of time here, that New York City is going to be completely shut down and quarantined. And if you think that's crazy, that the idea that the sorts of things that we saw in China couldn't come to your neighborhood and to one of the most densely populated places in North America, let alone say the entire country, all of the United States, well, I would just say look to Europe, because what we saw in China happened not only in Italy and then next in Spain, but also now in France. And this is breaking news from the last hour, that the Prime Minister of France came out and ordered that, hey, all nightclubs and bars and cafes and restaurants, they are going to be closed. And he said to anyone, hey, don't travel anywhere unless it's absolutely necessary. So sure, this quarantine is not going to be as strictly enforced, say, as the one in Italy, to where they are arresting people who leave their homes. In France, it's very close. This is a very extreme measure, and so we probably will see this here in the U.S. not too far from now. And of course, if that actually does happen, when the lockdown comes, it will mean a total collapse of our economy by definition, because no economic activity will be able to take place. And this, of course, though, despite the seeming inevitability of it, based on the actions of other countries who have not been able to contain this, the U.S. is maintaining that the number one concern is to preserve the U.S. economy. And so I guess the good news is then that the U.S. will avoid taking these draconian measures anytime soon. They will wait as long as possible before issuing a quarantine, though I do think that it will happen. Bill de Blasio in New York is still refusing to close the public schools, and the public schools are going to be a huge breeding ground for this, because kids are less like young people are really not most of the ones who are asymptomatic. Those are your asymptomatic spreaders. A kid gets it and then he comes home and he infects his whole family, and then all the the older people in the family get really sick and maybe grandma dies. And so it's not that likely that kids who catch this are going to be sick and miss school. They're going to keep going to school and spreading it to each other, and then they're going to bring it home and give it to all their family. The same thing's true with the subway. I mean, I understand what de Blasio is doing and trying to keep the city open, but I just don't think it's realistic. And don't get me wrong, I'm in no way in favor of any of these quarantines. I don't want a police state. I don't think it's a good idea. But when you look at the reality of it, I don't see anything else that they would be able to do. I think that the pressure will be completely oppressive. And oppressive, on the will of politicians. I mean that their hand will be forced, that they will have no choice but to do what's been done in China and Italy and Spain and now in France. Now, I want to revisit for a minute what I was saying earlier about the hope that there is some seasonality to this virus. If that's the case, if in summer, in warmer weather, like say weather above 60, 70 degrees, that we would expect this virus to die off and to not spread as easily. We would, expect that in areas of the United States right now and other countries that are already, have pretty warm weather relative to places like northern Italy, relative to France, relative to New York City, that we would not see so many cases. And while, you could look at, say, a map of the United States and say, well, where are your two big places where you're seeing a lot of cases? It's New York and Washington. Those places are both, pretty far up there. It's not really fair to say that, say, we here in Florida are shielded by the weather yet, because we don't know. Sure, we have some cases and not nearly as many as New York or Washington State, but that could just be because of the way that the outbreak is spreading, or the way that the virus is spreading, that it hasn't spread here as much yet. It also has to do with testing. Like I said, we don't have any real accurate data on where this virus is in the country because people are not being properly tested, and that will be a continual problem. People will not be properly tested, even though now it looks like they're going to start testing a lot more people, which means a lot more confirmed cases. Now, likewise, if you look at Italy, is southern Italy being hit as hard as northern Italy? Is it just because that's where the virus broke out initially that they have so much of a worse problem in the north of the country, or is it that the virus just doesn't spread as well in the south? I don't know. Same story with Spain. Is Spain's outbreak limited to the more northern regions that have a similar climate to France, or is it just as viral down in southern Spain, which has a very dry, warm climate? Iran is another one to look at. Iran has a very big problem with this virus, yet, anywhere south of Tehran really is pretty hot and dry, so you wouldn't expect that if this virus is going to have, a seasonal respite to where in the summertime, it just can't survive, you would expect that in a place like Iran, it wouldn't spread as badly as it has. So as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen anything, and again, I'm not a scientist, and I'm not going in and running regressions or anything, and frankly, there's just not enough data to do any of this, to really see any patterns between these different places where we see a substantial number of cases at this point. I think we're probably still too early to tell which areas are going to be more heavily impacted by this virus than others. Now, there are analysts who I greatly respect that think that we have made a short-term bottom in the stock market over this, at the end of last week, and that there is, technically speaking, we're poised for a move upwards. And all of this good news coming from, just the way in which the government's response has been perceived towards the end of the week, both yesterday and today, would tend to support that narrative and give a good excuse for a rally. With that said, though, I think that your next move down, which again is pretty inevitable as far as I'm concerned, I don't see any room for a sustained move upwards in equity prices. But your next leg down, I think, will come as a result as a result of the bad news that is going to inevitably come out about New York City, because New York's getting hit hard right now. I don't think people are putting enough focus on New York specifically. We need to be looking at New York now as we looked at Italy not too long ago. You shouldn't look at the whole of the United States because, the United States is very big. It's going to be like Europe, to where certain countries are not going to have it yet, and it's going to be isolated in other countries. Or states rather, but it's same concept, because the European countries are much smaller than the United States, because each European country is a single state. And so I think over the course of next week, people will start to wake up to just how bad this is going to hit New York, which, New York City, of course, is the financial capital of the world. That's certainly going to send shockwaves through financial markets, and I don't see how we are going to finish the week green. Let's put it that way. I think that you're going to have this, just like this week. This week was still a down week, even after this great rally on Friday, which ended up being, again, almost 10% up. So pretty much made up the losses of the day before. We came out even, but still down for the week. I'll make the same call for next week. Now that I'm a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice, there's that disclaimer. But with the way things are going in that state and in that city, with how serious de Blasio and Cuomo are taking this, the fact that they were, ahead of the White House, at least Cuomo was, on taking this seriously, tells me that New York is the next place that we're going to follow. That is the next Italy. And I think even Cuomo said that he expects to see 1,000 cases confirmed in New York by the end of this weekend, maybe? I can't remember exactly, but I heard it a couple days ago during his press conference, and I'm surprised that didn't get more play. I really think that the New York angle of this whole outbreak of the pandemic, of the Wu flu — is that the first time I've said Wu flu today? I think it has. I should say that more. Apparently, not to get off topic, but calling us the China virus or the Wuhan virus is controversial now. It's funny how things work out in the mainstream media. Very glad I don't follow them, but I hear these little bits and pieces now and again, and just kind of have to shake my head at them. Now, I want to revise one of the things I said a couple weeks ago, which was that I thought that this Wu flu pandemic would completely wreck the Florida economy because it would send all the tourists home because they don't want to be away from their home when this pandemic hits. They'd rather be somewhere where they feel safer. But considering that so many of the people who stay around here, at least where I am, and I know this is true with the rest of Florida, are from the Northeast. Namely places like New York, but also the other states around there. Since things are getting so bad up there relative to here, because in terms of confirmed cases, I think we might still be in the double digits in Florida. Way low. People might actually be staying here because they feel that it's more safe. And so that might dampen the hit to our economy slightly because, we're not going to have that massive population decline. I said that, an early end of the tourist season would bankrupt a lot of people who, borrowed money in anticipation of, the, income throughout, May essentially is when typically the last of the tourists go home. But as I said before, if the seasonality thing doesn't prove to be true, well then, and that warm climates are just as susceptible to this virus as cooler ones, like, say, New York, well then Florida is not going to be too far behind. We will have our own serious outbreak here in the next few weeks. So with that said, if you gain anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.